A Dai Sesshin is a 7-day, balls to the wall, hardcore, no holds barred, pedal to the metal, rock out with your Zen retreat. We did Rinzai Zen practice, which is samurai Zen practice. Jiriki and Tariki. These, like Dai Sesshin and a lot of the other terms I use, they're Japanese words. They come from the Myoshinji, Kyoto, Rinzai Zen style of practice. So Jiriki means your own power. Tariki means other power. So with Jiriki, which is what Zen Buddhism is, you are bringing yourself, your full effort and your full energy and from the tips of your toenails to the stubble on the top of your head, you are manifesting the practice by yourself. Tariki is a tradition like Christianity or Pure Land Buddhism. Like in Christianity, you are bringing in an other power to help you out spiritually. You're petitioning the Lord through prayer and priests and various sacraments. But in Zen, you do it yourself, kid.
In a blind spiritual taste test, which style wins, Jiriki or Tariki, or is it better to have a blended practice of both? We'll return to this question a little bit later, but now let's run through the average, absolutely hellish day at your Dai Sesshin retreat.
Suddenly the lights flip on in your cabin where you have not been getting your measly 3 hours of sleep because the guy next to you is snoring all night, and the shoji, who's in charge of waking all the students and the monks up, starts ringing a bell. You now have 10 precious minutes to throw on your long johns, because it's winter, and your layers and layers and layers of clothing, and then to throw over them your collar, your hakama, your kimono. Actually, with regards to all the sartorial accoutrements that a monk wears, Leonard Cohen has this great poem about how you put on all those things I just told you, your hakama and your koromo and your belt and your rukasu, and you put it all on over your enormous boner. Anyways, you've got 10 minutes to get on the zendo porch, take off your shoes, take off your socks, because you weren't allowed to wear socks in the zendo. Never mind that it's freezing cold because it's winter. And now you enter the formal practice space. There is form for that. And by bring yourself into the zendo, I mean you need to start practicing. Because if you don't, if you do something wrong, if you miss a point of form, there is a jiki-jitsu. The shoji, who wakes you up in the morning and who will soon serve you tea, is the mother figure of the zendo. They're in charge of helping and taking care of you. The jiki-jitsu is the father figure of the zendo. They're a little bit more stern, and they're in charge of charging the atmosphere of the zendo and keeping the practice tight. So you stand in the doorway, you put your hands in gasho. There's a certain angle that you put your hands at, and you bow. You keep your hands in gasho. You walk in straight lines in the zendo. You don't walk diagonally. You stumble into the zendo, and the jiki, like, oh my God, what am I doing here? The jiki-jitsu can say, hands in gasho. Then you sit down, cross your legs, hold your mudra, and you wait. In a little bit, the shoji comes in and offers the jiki-jitsu incense and tea, then comes down the line and offers everybody tea. Yes, you guessed it. There's a certain way you have to hold your cup when you're receiving the tea, next to the person beside you. When you want the shoji to stop pouring tea, you raise your hand up. Everything is communicated a certain way. There's absolutely no speaking in a zendo. What happens now? Absolutely freaking nothing. You sit Zazen. Your eyes are with a soft gaze about 3 feet in front of you on the wooden floor. Hopefully you practice in a zendo that does not have really interesting whirling wooden patterns in the floor, because then you get entranced and you start seeing faces. You do your meditation practice. These meditation sits run for 25 minutes, the end of which the jiki-jitsu will hit a bell to signal that the sit is over. Now he's got a pair of wooden clappers. One clap means we're going out for a meditative walk. Sooner or later, you're back on the cushion again. Back on the cushion again. back on the cushion again, back on the cushion again. And it goes on and on. You are allowed to cough into your sleeve. You are allowed to pass wind. We had a lot of wind passing in the zendo. The things that you're allowed to do, people wind up doing. We used to have a guy, he was a world famous mathematician from Puerto Rico. He'd done more retreats than anybody in our Sangha, our community. And he looked like a large hobbit with hair that would put Einstein's hair to shame. It was everywhere, sticking out. He had male pattern baldness, but his hair would stick out everywhere. And he'd be sitting there, and he'd make these faces while he was sitting, and then he would just lift one butt cheek and let it rip. That was allowed. You could pass wind in the zendo. You could sneeze. You could cough. You couldn't do things that were volitional. Basically, you had to just sit there, right? Eyes down. Like you're being forced to sit and do nothing. And as you do this, for sit after sit after sit, an energy begins to arise within you. Normally, during the average day, you are not forced to be with yourself amongst other people like this. It's really an interesting experience to be with yourself in a group. This is what we call the energy of a group practice. Like everybody's doing it together. And as you sit there, emotions arise, thoughts arise. Your brain cannot go get a cup of coffee. It can't get, I'm looking for my Nicorette. It can't go get a cigarette. You can't go get a glass of water. You can't check your email. You can't make a joke to a friend. There are no release valves for your inner life. So you have to sit with it, right? This is like fundamental to the practice. You will torture yourself. You will be burned alive in the white hot heat of thought and emotion if you let your mind run free during a session retreat, okay? But if you try and control your mind with your mind, you're going to drive yourself nuts. So after a morning of this, plus an afternoon and an evening, day 1, day 2, and eventually you would begin to realize you had no option but to do meditation practice. Put all that energy that's coming up in you, put that into the breath. Now, 4 times a day during these session retreats, a bell would ring up on a hill about a 10-second run away. Okay? It was in the sanzen room. Sanzen is where we did koan practice with our teacher. I'm not going to go into what koan practice is. I'm just going to go through the form for you. So, koan practice, once that bell rings, you are allowed to move. So all the rules are thrown out the window now. Usually people would run. So you blast off your cushion. You have to bow to the Jikijitsu on the way out of the zendo. You grab your sandals from the porch. You throw those on. You run through the snow. Oh, it was so wet and sloppy sometimes. You run through the snow, you slip on the mud, you go into the sanzen waiting room. There's a bell there. If you're the first person in, you don't have to wait. You grab the hammer, you hit the bell 3 times, hopefully not too hard because the shika, who's the head monk at the monastery, is sitting there and he's got to listen to dozens of people banging that bell all day. I went deaf at times. My ears were ringing when I was the shika. You blast down the gravel path, take off your shoes, you go into the sanzen room. The sanzen room is warm. There's really nice incense going. Roshi, who is the Zen master who gave you your koan, who you were coming to the retreat to practice with and meet and learn from, he's sitting in his chair, very sternly. And there's a cushion in the doorway. You do 3 great bows. And then you said, my koan is, and then you gave him the answer to your koan. As with sitting, you do not manifest the koan, you do not do koan practice with emotion or thought because the teacher will just ring you out, right? You have to manifest the answer completely to your koan. Then the teacher basically says, you're wrong, rings his bell, and you leave. The koan is a kind of pretext or tool that Rinzai Zen practitioners use to learn from the teacher. right? Because if you're just sitting on your cushion all day, every day, you can really get lost in your head. You can really sort of lose your way. You can have all kinds of wild spiritual fantasies and think that you're going down some true and important path when really you're just spinning your wheels. The teacher in Koan practice is there to help guide you along the straight and narrow. After you finish Koan practice, you go back to the Zen meditation hall, take off your shoes on the porch, bow when you enter the zendo, bow to the Jiriki, sit down, and it's hours and hours of more sitting now. We had 3 meals a day at the monastery. I won't go into all the form for meals. I just will say this, there's chanting, there's an exact way that you put your chopsticks down on the table. You have an oriyoki bowl set wrapped in cloths with a washcloth in there. And there's a very complex ritual and a lot of choreography around the meals. Why? Why do you think? It's really easy when you're eating to get lost in your head, to get lost in your greed, to get lost in your hunger and your appetite and the satiation of that appetite. But every single second of the day during a formal retreat is practice, including eating. It was very strict, very serious. Meals were not a time to indulge your appetite. They were a time to hold your bowl like this, your spoon like this, take your food and keep practicing. Eyes down, straightforward. You don't look around. Eyes down. That's what the monks would say if you were looking around. The jikijitsu, eating your meal. Meals went very, very quick, and there was so much interruption with the handikans, who were the servers. They'd bring the bowls around again. You got to put your phone down. You got to wait. You got to lots of form. Not like a dinner, happy dinner with your family, okay? Once a day, there was a teisho, which is a formal lecture that Roshi, the Zen master, would give. So again, there's all kinds of form. We come down in a line from the meditation hall. The teacher is there waiting. He would read the Koan text. So they're classic Koan texts, the Mumonkan. Sometimes he would do his talk on the Rinzai Roku. These talks would last maybe an hour. Sometimes, I remember one teisho that lasted 3 hours, and you're sitting there and you're listening to these and you just start nodding off. And Roshi used to look out at us and he'd say, "Your heads are bobbing like eggplants in the wind." Twice a day we did chanting, about an hour of chanting texts from Buddhism and Zen in Sino-Japanese, the Heart Sutra, the Lotus Sutra, Kanji Zaimon Hangyonen, You can see it's kind of a nasal chanting without any musicality whatsoever. You were not singing, you were chanting like this. We also had, during retreats, formal showers, which of course there was a form for. We also had samu, which was work practice. And you went to the kitchen, you chopped carrots, you helped the tenzo or the cook prep, or you were given a rake and you had to go out and rake up all kinds of different twigs and stuff. So all these things that I've told you, that's it. I think that's all we did. I don't think there was anything else. There was teisho, there was zazen, much sitting, there was koan practice, there was chanting, showers, formal meals, and everything else I told you. That was it. You did this 7 days in a row from 3 o'clock in the morning to about 10 o'clock at night. And so, as I have blasted through the average day of a Daiseshin retreat, perhaps you are beginning to get the picture. This is not a spiritual tradition that indulges you. It is not a spiritual tradition that caters to your whims. You have to bring yourself completely and fully to the practice every second of every day when you're not in the toilet and you're not sleeping. You have to suit up and show up. You can imagine what some of the benefits of a practice like this are. When you leave a session retreat, you are glowing. Something in you has always shifted. Unless you take off, we often had that. The shoji would come, flick on the lights, ring the bell at 3 o'clock in the morning, and like 3 beds would be empty and their cars gone from the parking lot. That happened. But if you made it through a retreat, I remember after my first retreat, I came out of it and everyone said, "You're glowing, your eyes are clear, you get sesshin eyes." You've had to bring yourself, your full energy, your full effort, your full focus, and your full concentration to everything you have done. Jiriki, own power. You brought yourself to the practice and you did it. There's something about, say, Christianity or Pure Land Buddhism, the Tariki traditions, the other power traditions. There's a kind of surrender to a higher power in these traditions that I think can loosen you up and open you up inside. When I was a monk and things sometimes got really difficult, like somebody told me once, there's a small difference between a breakdown and a breakthrough. Yeah, I had a lot of breakdowns at the monastery. There were times when I would get pushed so hard that I would find myself praying. I would find myself doing something that's not a very traditional Zen activity, which is help. I would say the help prayer. I didn't give my Our Fathers and Hail Marys and Glory Bees for my Catholic upbringing, but I would hurl a prayer of help out in the universe because it was so hard and I didn't have the power. I didn't have the own power or the strength to do it anymore. And there was an aspect of surrender to the universe that the Zen tradition didn't offer me, that this prayer that I grew up with did. I remember thinking at one point, what are you praying to? Is there a God you're praying to? We don't believe in that in Zen Buddhism. My teacher used to say, there is no God, and he is always with you. So I would offer this prayer, and I remember thinking, if my heart is such that it can cry out for help, then the universe is such that it has ears to listen. Help, help, help. And I put all my effort and energy into that word. A combination of these two styles of spiritual practice, for me, have been really important in striking a balance between my own effort and asking for help from the outside. Okay, that's all I got for today. I just shot like 40 minutes of this, me rambling. I hope it makes some sense. I've got a Patreon page. I'm going to put the link below now. Please, if you can help out there, that would be great. It's slowly but surely kind of developing, this Patreon page. These videos take a lot of time and effort. They're all for free. I'm just passing the what we used to call the begging bowl. If you want to throw something in, that'd be great. I have essays up on Patreon and some blog posts and stuff. So we've got a little bit of a community there. People ask questions during the video on my essays, and I answer them. So if you're interested in any of that, go to Patreon. Otherwise, Jiriki, Riki, Riki, Tiki, Tabby. See you later.